Do I want to watch another Dead Dude of the Day video presented by Kingdom Lyceum? Yeah. Is the Pope Catholic? Yes. Yes, he is Catholic. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Dead Dude of the Day, presented by Kingdom Lyceum. I'm your host, Jeff Peterson, and today we're going to be talking about another very influential person in world history, and that person is Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul II, or JP2 as the youths call him, was born Karol Józef Wojtyla? Karol Józef Wojtyla in Wadowice, Poland in 1920. For the sake of the video, we're just going to call him John Paul or JP2 because we're cool like that throughout the whole video, just to keep from getting a little bit confused. Okay, so growing up in Poland throughout the 1920s and 30s had a huge impact on John Paul II. Not to mention, he grew up a Catholic in a city with a very large Jewish community. The city of Wadowice was also less than 20 miles from the future site of the Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. In fact, later in John Paul II's life, he would see many friends and community members and neighbors rounded up by the Nazis and sent to these horrible concentration camps. These were people with whom he played sports. These were people with whom he went to school. Obviously, this had a huge impact on how John Paul II saw the world. Another huge impact on John Paul II while he was young was the death of his mother when he was 8 years old. JP2 was an excellent student and finished secondary school with high honors. He moved to Krakow, Poland to study at Jagiellonian University. I would say you get the degree if you can even pronounce their name. Jagiellonian. However, this move was in 1939, which World War II history buffs will quickly point out to you was the year that Hitler invaded Poland and began World War II in Europe. This invasion put a halt to John Paul II's studies, as he spent the next 4 years attending secret classes while simultaneously working in a factory. Mad props to JP2 for getting his degree at night school while working a full-time job. Alright, we joke, but he is actually the only modern pope to ever hold an actual 9-to-5 job. It was during World War II where John Paul II began to feel a calling on his life to become a Catholic priest. Guided and protected by Krakow's Archbishop Prince Adam Sapieha, in 1946, John Paul II gave his first Mass as a Catholic priest at the Wawel Cathedral. From there, John Paul II spent the next 10+ years pursuing 2 doctorates while studying in Rome, and then eventually as a theology professor at his alma mater, Jagiellonian University. And then at the more easy to pronounce Lublin University. It's also important to note that this is during the Soviet occupation of Poland that came after World War II and during the Cold War. The normally anti-Christian and anti-religion Soviets allowed several Catholic churches to continue to operate in many of their satellite nations under extreme state control. However, they were less than thrilled about this charismatic young priest that drew large crowds to Sunday Mass in Krakow. Recognizing John Paul II's leadership, the current Pope, Pius XII, appointed JP2 Bishop of Krakow in 1958 and then promoted him again to the Polish Archbishop in 1963. It was during his time as Bishop and Archbishop that John Paul II distinguished himself as the leading Catholic bishop who was conservative in doctrine but extremely progressive when it came to social issues. His leadership in many areas within the Catholic Church led to his appointment as cardinal in 1967. During this time, John Paul II wrote The Acting Person in 1969, which was his most influential theological and philosophical work by far. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Catholic hierarchy, a cardinal is the highest office in the Catholic Church underneath the Pope. As cardinal, JP2 stood firm against communism and saw the establishment of the Archchurch in Krakow during communist rule in 1977. A year later, in 1978, Pope Paul VI died and John Paul I was elected from the College of Cardinals as the next pope. However, he died after only 33 days in office. This led to another papal election. Despite being a controversial figure in the Catholic Church due to some of his more progressive views, Polish Cardinal Karol Józef Wojtyla was elected to be the next pope. In case you forgot, that was John Paul II's real name. He chose John Paul as his papal name as well to honor his predecessor. JP2 was the first non-Italian pope in over 400 years. Pope John Paul II was revolutionary in many ways. He was the first to harness the use of television to spread his message. He was also one of the first popes to travel as extensively as he did, due to the improvements in modern travel over the past few years. He was also the first pope to truly harness globalism as a vehicle for spreading the Catholic message. JP2 traveled to over 120 countries during his time as pope. In these countries, he regularly drew crowds numbering in the millions to hear him speak. John Paul II was also not afraid to call out communism and its leaders for their oppression, but also he would call out capitalism for their greedy consumerism. No one was safe from JP2's criticisms. His experiences under Nazi and communist regimes gave him a great passion for oppressed people and their human rights. He also sought to grow the Catholic Church's influences in regions of the world where it was traditionally not as strong. This led him to canonize and beatify more saints into the Catholic Church than his 5 predecessors combined. During the 1980s, the Cold War between the Soviets and the free world had reached its peak. Several nationalist movements were also taking place in Soviet satellite nations. John Paul II was a strong supporter of national independence, and nowhere more so than in his home country of Poland. JP2 threw his weight behind Lech Walesa and his Polish Solidarity movement. Conspiracies abound that this was the true reason for an assassination attempt where John Paul II was shot in 1981. He survived and would go on to be Pope for 2 more decades. In 2005, Pope John Paul II died at his home in the Vatican City. He had Parkinson's disease, but continued to carry out weekly Mass in Rome until the very end. He was beatified and canonized by Pope Benedict XVI, an unprecedented mere months after his death. Normally, you had to be dead for at least 5 years before you could even be considered for canonization or beatification. JP2 got in a couple months. From a biblical perspective, it can be difficult to analyze Pope John Paul II's life and papacy. With Roman Church doctrine straying from many essential truths and biblical fundamentals, it can be hard to say whether a pope is good. However, when you look at his influence, there are many net positives and common graces due to his focus on human rights issues. Needless to say, the Lord used John Paul II to accomplish a lot of good in his world. JP2, however, did not adequately address early allegations of abuse within the Catholic Church worldwide. This is without a doubt his greatest shortcoming. With hundreds of millions of Catholics in the world today, though, his influence on Catholic organizational practices and his firm stance on fundamental doctrines within the Catholic Church has had an impact now and for years to come. And that's what makes Pope John Paul II our dead dude of the day. Thanks for hanging out with us. I feel like I say this every video, but if you like and subscribe and turn on notifications, you'll never miss a video, and you will be always on.